Blog Talk Radio.
Hi everyone, this is Marty McDermott of Franchise Interviews, and welcome back to part 2 of our Friday edition. Well, you've heard the expression location, location, location. Today, Ryan Cunningham, the president of Javelin Solutions, is helping us better understand this important topic, and that's coming up in 20 seconds on Franchise Interviews, so stick around. Asking an entrepreneur who owns one. I'm your host, Marty McDermott, with my co-host, Don Johnson. And if you've ever dreamed about owning your own business, then this is a show to listen to. And today we have a very special guest, Ryan Cunningham. And Ryan is the founder and president of Javelin Solutions. And, Don, I think you're up.
Yeah, Ryan, me being in the financing business, sometimes it seems like as time goes on, it is harder for people to find real estate. But on a national basis, is it harder? I mean, is it getting harder for people to find real estate?
You know, and I don't want to overwhelm you with numbers. I went on a speaking engagement last year where I just gave a overview because I'm also a member of the ICSC, which is the International Council of Shopping Centers, and I merged information from Fran Data and the International Franchise Association with the ICSC, and what I came across really amazed me. As you know, there's over 3,000 franchise systems in the U.S., according to Fran Data. There are almost 1 million units, just real estate-based units in the U.S. today. Every 8 minutes, according to my calculation, a franchise opens in the U.S.
Right.
And what amazed me was there was a demand in 2006 of about 60 million square feet of space demand from franchisees looking for space. You flip that around and you look at the ICSC, which really all developers are members of the ICSC. If you look at their statistics, they'll show you that about 30 million square feet of new retail space was built in 2006. So it's about half of the demand was built in 2006. And the big challenge is there's about 2 billion square feet of existing older retail space. The problem is a lot of that is obsolete. A lot of that is run down. The tenants have kind of degraded a little bit. The growth of the city has maybe moved away from those. So it becomes a huge challenge to kind of cull through this huge base of older retail to find the stuff that's still going to perform, because the new stuff is very expensive. And, I would say 95% of franchisors really are not able to pay the rents of the brand new lifestyle centers that the Starbucks and Paneras of the world are going into. Really, it's cost prohibitive for most franchisees to go into space like that and still be a successful business.
Yeah, I'm coming across people who are about to rent some lease space that's under new construction.
Yes.
And, sometimes that can go on 6 to 12 months or so. But over the last couple of years, I've heard more of that going on, that they're looking at a new construction. It's not going to be built for a while. They're still starting the financing process.
That's right. And because there's such a limited supply and such a huge demand, one of the things that the first discussion I have with any franchisee for any of my clients is I share with them the issue that we can go to a landlord and say, this is Jungle Quest, and we're going to put a Jungle Quest in Des Moines, Iowa. That landlord is going to say, well, who's signing the lease? And 99.9% of the time, the franchisor is not guaranteeing the lease or signing the lease. It's going to be the franchisees who sign the lease. The landlord, very early in the process, is going to want to understand the financial wherewithal of the person signing the lease. And normally, a franchisee may set up an LLC for the entity to own and run that franchise. End of the day, landlord's going to say, you know what, I need you to personally guarantee this lease. That's when the rubber really meets the road for a commitment for an entrepreneur, whether it's what I've done or what a franchisee does. That's where they put their name on the line to say, if I don't succeed, I am personally liable for rent for 5 years and operating costs for 5 years and reimbursing landlord. It's a huge commitment. So I advise franchisees to really get their house in order before they enter this process, because that is going to be a key determinant of what kind of space we're going to be able to tie down for them.
It's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the biggest decisions, when they pay their franchise fees and when they sign their lease, two of the most, stressful parts of the process for people.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, Ryan, what are some creative strategies a franchisee can use to get ahead of the competition and finding the optimal site?
Yep, and it's interesting. I did a presentation where I talked about creative real estate strategies from the franchisor perspective. But when I looked at this in preparing for this show, I realized it works just as well for any person looking to buy a business, buy a franchise unit. It works just as well, because if it is real estate based, then you need to really look at a couple of things. One of them is multiple size models. If you go in and say, I want to buy a franchise for this deli, you want to know, can that deli be bigger than the average one? Can it be smaller? Can you make money if it's smaller? Because real estate does not come, it never, you can go out in the market and say, I need 1,750 square feet priced at $22 a square foot. It's never going to be found. It's going to be $2,000. It's going to be $1,500. It's going to be more expensive, never less. And so one of the things is you need flexibility from your franchisor. You want your franchisor to say, yes, we have different models, and the revenue stream from those models all support the size. We could go smaller, you can make money. We could go larger, and we could add products. That's important. Secondary space, I think understanding what kind of space you need. If you're buying a system and it has to be right in the middle of Main and Main, and it needs to be right where a Starbucks would go, you're going to have to realize that the cost that you'll incur and the difficulty you'll incur for finding real estate will be exorbitant. And I advise, my 15 clients that I represent are real estate solutions that are easier to find because we can go into secondary space. We don't need to be on the corner of Main and Main or the brand new lifestyle center. We can be across the street. We can be behind it. Most of these people are destination, where it's not my whole business is based on somebody driving by, seeing me, and pulling in. It is people know me. They've gone online. They've got directions. Once they find me, it will be easy for them to find me again. So I think that's important. Creativity with a franchisor, non-traditional space. Can you go into a college environment or a high school environment? Can you go into a medical environment, a sporting venue, a transportation?
An airport.
An airport. Kiosks, any kind of non-traditional real estate solution. That's not new news. About 5 years ago, people started to say, wow, Hardee's went into my local sports venue and a franchisee is making a killing there. People figured that out, but now it's getting even more interesting because it's not going to just the big airports. It's going to the regional airports. It's going to college, small college campuses in providing food service, for example. So part of it is what kind of flexibility, what kind of creativity, when you look at the portfolio of X number of sites that franchise system that you're looking at has, do you see some variety in there? Do you see smaller and larger? Do you see some interesting solutions that may fit? Do you see things like tertiary cities? I mean, finding space in Des Moines is a lot easier than San Jose, California. You start to say, can I open a franchise in a secondary or tertiary market where real estate's not as expensive, the competition isn't as great, and it's probably going to be faster and easier to get in? Downtowns, international resorts, anything that kind of expands your horizon to say there's a lot of things I could look at to fit in my community, and it wouldn't just be I need to be in Starbucks-like space.
Don't a lot of franchisors have to or say that it has to be a certain square footage? Don't really have that flexibility with the size, like a few of your clients, like a Marble Slab Creamery or Maggie Moo's. Aren't all those basically the same size?
Yes. It all tends to be that 1,500 to 2,500 square feet. There has to be some flexibility because, as I said, real estate never comes in the size you want. Dimensions become a big thing. You may find a 2,000-foot space. It may be narrow on the front and really skinny. Well, if you're a retailer, you need storefront. You need glass. You need an area to display your merchandise, to put your signs up that people see you. If they go into their store and it's 10 feet wide but 100 feet deep, that doesn't get you anything, that doesn't accomplish anything. Landlords tend to break the space up according to their dimensions, and a lot of times it's a tough fit. So I think franchisors are getting more flexible, and what's amazing is when you run numbers and you say, wow, I could never afford paying $30 a square foot in rent. I really only want to pay $20. What's interesting is if you've got multiple size models, and if you can say, I really want to be in this area, the demographics are wonderful, but the rent is so high to be in this space, part of it is when you run numbers, you can say, wow, if I could downsize to 1,500 square feet versus 2,000, I could afford $25, $27 rent because the square footage decrease offsets the rent. There's ways you can kind of look at it and say, yeah, I can go a little higher in rent if I go lower in square footage. Where you kill yourself is when you go in at space that's too big to begin with, if the rent is too high, and then you go in upside down and you just don't get caught up because your rent number is too big a portion of your revenue.
And that's where you and the franchisor coordinate. If that smaller size will still be a good fit.
I do all the work for Athlete's Foot, and they have a wonderful system where they just have a correlation between the number of pairs or the pairs of shoes sold versus your rent amount. And it's a rough correlation, but in essence, if their average sales is $600,000 per unit in the system, and a franchisee wants to go to Hoboken and pay a fortune in rent,
right,
I can do the math and say, gosh, you're going to need to support maybe $1 million or $1.2 million in gross shoe sales. How are you going to outperform by a 100% margin the system? And that kind of brings back
valuable information, Ryan. That's what you just brought up.
Yeah.
So just all your services in general are so crucial. But that particular aspect, going into a certain town, knowing they have to do a certain amount of volume to cover that lease and overhead, it's crucial information.
A lot of franchisees, very few franchisees actually budget a rent number. And so when I talk to them, I'll say, what can you afford to pay in rent? What does your model say? What have you? Because as we know, franchisors can't say, well, you're going to make this much money in the first year and this much. That's up to you to figure out. And when you figure it out, you need to figure out what ultimately I want to make this much money. To do that, I can spend this much. Rent's going to be a big portion of those costs. I need to try to limit my rent and real estate-related costs to X. Bring that back to me. I bring in my local broker to say, okay, we're going into this community. We're aiming for this kind of space and this kind of rent. Can we make them fit? I want to know that up front, because if the broker says we can't make that fit, you need to be higher in rent to afford the kind of space you need, we go back to the franchisor to talk about how do we work through this? What gives in this? Do we go to smaller space? Do we go to a farther, a more remote type location to get to lower rent? Or does the franchisee need to rework their numbers and understand what it's going to take to get into space?
Right, absolutely. Ryan, we have about 15 seconds. What's the best way for someone to get more information on your services?
I think the best way is to just go onto my website, which is www.javelinsolutions, plural, and it's .net.
It's a very informative website, by the way. And Ryan, I want to thank you. You've been such a terrific guest. We're definitely going to have you back because I think there's more to talk about.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks again, Ryan.
Appreciate it.
Have a good day.
Have a great day. Great show, huh, Don?
Yeah.
Just so informative. Just very important guest, on such an important topic. So that's
First
great.
time we had this type of service
Absolutely
being discussed on the show. It is such a crucial part of the whole franchising process, the importance of the location, yeah.
All right, so you did a great job, Don, and for our listeners, go to franchiseinterviews.com, and I'll see you next week, Don, for another great show.
Definitely. Thanks, Marty.
Thanks, Don. Take care.
Bye-bye.